Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from Group 1 and today we will explain the last material of second language acquisition and and the members are ARIANSYAH
My name is ANISHA YASMINTYA, MILNAWATI, HAIRUNISA TUZZAHRA,
and Muhammad ASRUNI.
and the first material is receptive activities. Receptive activities are listening and reading because learners do not need to produce language to do this. They receive and understand it. And then comprehension of written or spoken language involves both bottom-up and top-down processing. Bottom-up processing requires prior knowledge of the language system, vocabulary, morphology, phonology, syntax, and discourse structure. And for top-down processing can compensate for linguistic limitation to some extent by allowing learners to guess the meaning of words they have not encountered before. And from top-down processing utilize prior knowledge of content, context, and culture. And then reading. Reading is the most important area of activity for individual to engage in for the development of L2 academic competence. And Grab Ergo research on fluent academic reading in terms of 6 component abilities and types of knowledge that are involved in the activity. First is automatic recognition ability, vocabulary and structural knowledge, formal discourse, structured knowledge, content or word background knowledge, synthesis and evaluation process or strategies, cognitive knowledge and comprehension monitoring. And he also argued that list of the following function for reading in academic setting, which are listed here in order of their likely difficulty for learners. First is reading to find information, reading for general understanding, reading to learn, and the last is reading to critique and evaluate. And the next material will be by Yasmin.
Okay, I will continue the materials. The material is about acquiring reading skill in second language learning. Acquiring reading skill in second language learning is separated into 2 sections, beginning second language reading and academic reading. So I will explain the first step. The first step is beginning second language reading. In beginning second language reading, developing fluency in reading requires acquiring sufficient knowledge of the second language. Therefore, here are the steps of developing fluency in beginning second language reading. The first is learning a new system of graphic representation. This means learner whose first language is written in a different orthographic system or the alphabets from the second language need to be able to recognize symbols in the target language as an early step. For example, a second language students whose first language are Chinese, Japanese, or Korean need to put an extra effort to learn the English alphabets because they have a different types of writing system. And the second step is learning to recognize and interpret new convention of punctuation. In the beginnings of second language reading, learners also requires learning to recognize and interpret new convention of punctuation as punctuation provides information about the grammatical constituents and signal aspects of meaning that are carried by the intonation in spoken language. For example, Thai and Chinese learners do not use spaces in their writing system. Therefore, it might be a little hard for them to read in English as English use spaces in their writing system. The third is exposure of second language vocabulary and basic grammatical structures. Learners who already have substantial amount of second language vocabulary and basic grammatical structures will be able to read and extract information of second language text easier than those who don't. And the second is academic reading. The development of academic reading proficiency requires extensive exposure of written second language text because of the more complex grammatical forms and vocabularies. The required second language linguistic knowledge are first, a large recognition of vocabulary of both basic and subject-specific terms. Second, understanding complex sentence structure and punctuation convention. The third is understanding organization features at the sentence levels to identify elements and distinguish information. The fourth is understanding organization features at discourse levels, such as how texts are structured and how information is organized. The next material will be presented by Milna.
Okay, the next is listening. Listening is a very important activity both for students who want or need to participate in oral interpersonal communication and for students who want or need to receive information from oral sources such as lecturer and media broadcast. There are two kinds of listening, general listening and selective listening. General listening only requires the listener to get the general core of the message, while listening selectively requires the perception and understanding of important details. The first step of student learning listening input listening is if they know in advance what the speaker will talk about, keyword or vocabulary of what will be delivered has been studied before. The speaker often stops at the boundaries between part of the sentence. While listening is better if it is included with the video so students can see the body language of the speaker. And the last, the communicative situation is the speaker repeats what was delivered. Many non-linguistic factors also influence completeness in starting to listen to L2. First, signal quality, and then background noise, any disturbance of the listener attention, and affective feature. Many students report that they find it easier to understand the words L2 produced by their own L1 speaker than by native L2 speaker. And then academic listening. Academic listening requires a great deal of knowledge of L2 language. It must have a lot of vocabulary, complicated sentence structure, and organizational feature of the sentence and discourse level that distinguish new from old information and highlight important context. And the next material will be delivered by HAIRUNISA.
So the next is productive activities. In the productive activities, there are two, writing and speaking. In here, I'm going to explain about writing. So productive activities itself is comprehension of written or spoken language requires prior knowledge of vocabulary, morphology, phonology, syntax, and discourse structure to access words and combine them into phrase. So productive activities for language use essentially same like the receptive activities, use bottom up and top down for reception. So there are differences between writing and speaking. The first one is writing is typically addressed to readers and speaking to listeners. As we know that writing will write something maybe in the book, blogger, or paper, so it will read by the others. But for speaking, we speak to others orally, so someone who will talk with will listen what we said. And then the next is writing is typically addressed. Writing usually allows time for planning and editing of production, while speaking is often unplanned and requires online or real-time processing. And then writing is more likely than is speaking to be dissociate from the immediate time and place of production and from a specific audience. And then the next is writing. Writing is the most important productive activity for L2 learners to develop if they will use the language for academic purpose or in certain type of service function. So, writing is commonly medium testing knowledge the learners in L2 itself. So, for example, there is a step. For first, formulating mental concept that are to be expressed centrally requires content knowledge. And then the second, recognizing what content will be relevant for intended readers and what will be. And then the next is constructing text within socially defined convention of expression, including selecting linguistic forms and organization patterns that are appropriate for the topic, purpose, and audience. Also requires other aspect of culture knowledge. And then the next is beginning L2 writing. So in the beginning L2 learning, learners must be learned is the first one. Learners need to learn symbol for encoding the target language as an early step in acquisition. The second is some learners begin with the low-level tasks of copying, even tracing over words and phrases that they recognize by sight, or recording graphically something that they hear spoken. And then the next is academic writing. So in the academic writing, effective academic writing requires considerable knowledge of linguistic elements at levels of vocabulary, morphology, and syntax. So the next will be delivered by ASRUNI.
The next is about speaking. Speaking is an important area of activity for second language learner because by speaking we can produce words that can help us to interact with another people from another nation that can be from native speaker. For example, speaking can be socially, can be instrumentally. The example is like tourists generally need to ask direction and seek information about hotel and entertainment, and immigrants need to shop for goods, and then service and describe symposium of health probably, and then foreign student and other temporary resident need to negotiate transaction for housing, utilities, and currency exchange. The next is about speech act. Speech act is a language used to accomplish speaker goal by means of utterance, which request something, apologize, promise, promise, deny, express emotion, compliment, complain, and so forth. So from speech act we can take information from another people, and by ourselves we can take the meaning. And the next is another aspect of speaking competence. There are three kinds of another aspect. The first is knowledge of conversational. The second is knowledge of contextualizing, and the last is knowledge of communication strategies. The first is knowledge of conversational structure. Is a possible different approach in for turn taking, where discuss about the section on discourse. Some links consider interruption, overlap, and simultaneous speaking to be appropriate, and some consider period of silence. So in knowledge of conversational structure, we should know how and when to interrupt someone when they are speaking. And the second is knowledge of contextualizing. In this context of contextualizing as an element of communication that allows people to express and interpret meaning beyond the preferential meaning that the surface structure message provide. So in knowledge of contextualizing, we should know how to contextualize the someone refers to something when they're speaking, and how we can interpret the meaning itself. The last is knowledge of communication strategies. This is the strategies that how we should acquire speaking. The strategies that we need to know and we need to learn. There are type of communication strategies. The first is avoidance. The first is topic avoidance. This is avoiding reference to a subject for which the learner lacks necessary vocabulary. And the second is message abandonment, giving up on topic because it is too difficult to talk about. So we should avoid something that maybe another speaker cannot understand. The second is paraphrase. There are three: approximation, word coinage, and circumlocution. The next is conscious transfer, literal translation, and then language switch, and then FL for assessment, and the last meme is using gesture or other non-verbal meaning to refer to another object or event. Thank you.
And I think that's all from us. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.